I'm here to talk about planning out your worksheet. Many of you know the formulas, other things here, but it's kind of visualizing it. You could draw it on a sheet of paper. If I did that and you film me, it would take forever today. Let's say you're a jewelry maker and you have materials to buy. So I could say materials. And then I'm doing necklaces or bracelets, okay? So I'm going to say beads, chain, clasp. And let's say for each bracelet I had to spend $4 on them. The chain might be, let's say, 75 cents. I type that in. The clasp is not too bad. It's only 50 cents. I could be getting these things at Michael's or some local craft store or even online. And then I'm finding out if I add this up with the equal sum, it's costing that. While you're doing it, you might want to format, and I could say total cost. Make it bold. It stands out when we're doing this here. I'm not doing this as an Excel lesson, but showing you how to visualize things. Next, what we have to do here, it's 5 1/4 here. We have to figure out how long it takes to make it. And what it is, you want to be making a little bit more than minimum wage. And so let's say time to make. And let's just say it takes a half an hour. That showed up as currency. We could always change that later or just click on the comma. So what it is here, in an hour we can make 2 of these bracelets. But then we want to mark this up. If we're selling this for $10, I'm just going to say sales price. We could say $10 here, or we're going to double. We're going to say $10.50. So we could say equal this times 2, doubling the price. So it's $10.50. We might want to change the markup there. You would want to have, I'm going to put a row in between here, and I'm going to say mark up. I'm going to say we're going to double the price. And then we could just change this formula to put this in here. So you still got the $10.50. So you sell the 2 of them. Next thing we're going to say, how much am I making an hour? So what you're doing there, you're taking this thing in here, you're subtracting it. I think you understand that. Equal this minus the 5 1/4. Okay, that's 5 1/4 times. We're going to need parentheses in here. It's an arithmetic function here. So what it is, this is what we're going to be making in a half of an hour. But we need those parentheses here. Sorry. I put a parenthesis in here, parenthesis in here. And that's only going to say we're making $5.50. And then we want to double that. So we multiply that times 2. There is a mistake in this formula. And what I'm saying here is this minus this times that. We're making actually $10.50 an hour. So I have to recalculate that. And I could just say TBD at this point. I have to work out that formula in a couple of minutes here. Other thing too, when you're selling it, you've got to figure out other things too. If you're really making money off of this, let's say you're going to craft shows, selling. You could say craft shows, travel, gas, number hours there, and you might have to bring somebody with you, buy lunch, other things too, lunch incidentals. parking perhaps. You've got all these things that you have to consider in there. But what we need to do, we have to work on that formula here. We're doing the visualization here, but this is really important, okay? So what it is here, let's say we want to mark it up by 3. We're selling it for $15.75. But I want to figure out what my hourly rate is. And if I'm doing this in a half of an hour, I'm doing 2 of them. So I'm going to need like a coefficient here. But what I would suggest doing is how many you can make in an hour. So I could say quantity made in hour. You're making 3 of them. 2 of them, I meant to say. So what we're going to be doing now, I want to determine my hourly rate now. So what it is, I'm going to be selling 2 of these, so it's going to be equal, I'm going to use a parenthesis here, this times, we're going to say the 1575 times 2 because you're selling 2 of them, okay? And I'm going to use the cell reference here. Close this out, the parenthesis here, and what we're doing here, if I just say this, that I'm making $31.50, that's the gross, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this by the 2. However, it's saying I'm making $15.75 an hour. However, we've got the costs involved. A lot of things when you're doing this, you really have to factor in there. This is where you want to get the piece of paper. Because what it is, I could break this down again. I'm doing this in a very simplistic fashion here. I'm going to say net profit each. So it's going to be equal this minus this. That's your profit each. But what it is here, if you have to factor in the time, you have to pay yourself. So you have to say salary. So it's equal this, the profit on each one. You're selling 2 of them. If you're selling 2 of them, you divide it by the quantity. So what it is here, I'm just going to write this down as I do it. I'm talking about the thinking process. So what it is, I made 2 of these. I'm selling these for $31.50 for the 2 of them. And then I have the cost of $10.50. You subtract that, it's $21.50. That is your profit, okay? You're going to have to factor other things like the selling here. So what I'm going to, as an example here, I'm going to say equal this times the 2. We got the $31.50. I'm going through this step by step. And then I have to subtract the materials minus the 2 made in the hour times the 5 1/4. So I'm going to put a few parentheses in here. So I'm actually making $21 an hour, but I'm saying, well, let's say I can speed it up. I can do 3 in an hour. See how the hourly rate goes up? But then we're saying maybe I should only mark it up 2.5 times. I'm making $23.63 an hour. But when you factor in, let's say, driving 2 hours to the craft show, plus the gas, the number of hours there, sitting there, and if it's a rainy day, you ain't gonna make squat. Other thing too, you might want to say, if you're selling on Etsy, you could sell it there too. And you have to pay a commission to them. And then I could just say, put a row in here, insert, commission. And what I often do when I'm doing these things here, I do a little bit of indenting. It's not to be fancy, but to know how you have subpoints in here. And you might have to do a few formulas in here, such as what it costs to travel. I could say travel cost 0.50 per mile. Number of hours there, I could just say 8 hours. Let's say I have to buy lunch. I might want to buy a couple of bottles of water because it's a really hot summer day. I could say 12 bucks. And then you might have to pay to get into the craft show. They might charge $35 entry fee. When you're doing things here, last thing, if you're going to say $35 entry fee, you can't type it in that way. I would say entry fee. And then I could, let's say the travel cost here, and it could be, let's say, 40 miles round trip. So what you'd have to do here so I could have in here the miles here, add columns here, so I know what I'm doing here. So if it's 20 miles, 50 cents here, and I could just say in parentheses here, miles rate per mile. So what it is here, equal this times that. So it's going to cost you $10 for gas there. You're there 8 hours, that's your time here. And then I'm just going to put the $12 over here, add that up, and then what it's cost you just to get there. Then you don't know how many you're going to sell. You could sell total sales units. Fix the spelling later here. And let's say you sold 300 units. And then what you would do here, you also got to click tax, other things too. And let's just keep this simple right now. So what it is, it's going to be gross sales. I could say I sold 300 of these at $13.13 equal 300 times the 1313. So you made it. You sold a lot of things here, but you also have to figure out your hourly rate. Travel, that's good. But let's say you it was raining and you only sold 13 of them. Not that much. And then you could just say net profit for the day. So what I would do here, I would say equal the $170 minus the cost to get there minus, and what it's going to be also the number of units sold times the 5 1/4. So it would be the 5 1/4 times the number of units sold. You made $45.38. If you were there 8 hours that day, including driving, you made a little bit over $5. Okay. However, let's say you sold 129 units. Not bad. And I could say hourly rate. I would say equal this divided by the 8 hours. I should have had that there, right, to be correct. But it's 119. But if you had a couple of people working for you and it was like 24 people, you had to pay them. That's not bad. But sometimes these craft shows want a percentage of your gross. As I said, I start off doing something simple. It sounds a little complicated, but it's really not that difficult. It's planning things out. A lot of people, when they're planning on selling anything, whether it's a craft, a handmade item, or even jars of food, jelly, or growing food, there is a lot of other incidentals in there. Good luck with your spreadsheet.